part of the conversation here. But what we know that we can do, what we have done, is that we can leverage race as a benefit and as a competitive edge.
Stacey Abrams, a leading Democratic candidate for Georgia governor, knows she has her work cut out for her ahead of next year's election. While she could make history as the first black woman governor in the country, the playing field is different from 2018 when she barely lost against Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who was then Secretary of State and the top election official in the state.
We saw a surge in participation, and unfortunately in 2021, in response to such a tremendous turnout among voters, we saw this retrenchment and these passages of onerous legislation. But what we know is that Georgia voters understand their power now, and our responsibility is to ensure they understand the laws, that we continue to fight against rules that seek to suppress their voices.
Georgia's Republican-led legislature purged nearly 102,000 voters from its voter rolls, and Senate Bill 202 passed in March, placing restrictions on absentee voting next year. Abrams hopes by educating Democratic voters of the new rules, she can drum up enough support from a racially diverse coalition of voters and overcome restrictive voting laws. Abrams has made voting rights a focal point since her 2018 loss and has pushed for federal voting rights legislation. Amid political infighting among Democrats in Congress, particularly West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who indicated he would not support President Biden's Build Back Better bill, despite his opposition, Abrams maintains full support of Manchin.
Senator Manchin has actually been a strong partner in moving voting rights forward. It was under his leadership that we were able to craft the revised Freedom to Vote Act. It's why we now still have conversations happening about the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act.
Speaking of Manchin, he was the subject of a controversial interview between Vice President Kamala Harris and radio host Charlamagne the God.
So who's the real president of this country? Is it Joe Manchin or Joe Biden, Madam Vice President?
Come on, Charlamagne.
Come
on. It's Joe Biden.
I can't tell sometimes.
No. It's Joe Biden. And don't start talking like a Republican about asking whether or not he's president.
He was the subject of conversation between our vice president and Charlamagne the God in terms of, his influence within the Democratic Party. What are your thoughts on that?
My belief is that lawmaking is difficult. It is a complex set of situations, and you have friends and lesser friends depending on the issue. But what matters most is our intention and our resolution. We know that there is work to be done, that 4 years of the previous president and the 4 years we have had of the current governor means that we have to redouble our efforts, and we cannot be distracted by short setbacks.
Abrams recognizes her race will draw national attention, but she says she's focusing on the issues impacting Black and brown communities in Georgia.
We know that in this economic recovery that they like to tout in Georgia, that Black and Latino workers have been left behind. We know that when small business dollars were being dispersed, and that as we see new opportunities come to Georgia, they are not reaching our communities of color. We may be a good place to do business, but we are number 40 in income inequality. We are number 37 in poverty. We are near the top in maternal mortality, and we are number 1 for women of color, for Black women to die giving birth or within a year of giving birth. We have a state that is in crisis.
Political scientist Dr. Tammy Greer cautioned Abrams supporters when she announced her run earlier this month.
So it would be great to have a Black woman to be governor of Georgia. And if you still have a conservative majority in the legislative branch, then your Black woman governor will look impotent, because nothing will get done.
And so if you were to win the election, how do you go beyond the symbolism and actually get things done to avoid being considered impotent?
I served in the legislature for 11 years, 7 of those years as the minority leader. And during my tenure, I was incredibly effective, in part because I recognize that to get most good things done, you have to be able to work with both sides of the aisle. But I'm also very familiar with the executive responsibilities and the executive authority held by the governor.
Abrams' opponent, Governor Kemp, faces a growing field of primary contenders, including Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones and former U.S. Senator David Perdue, not to mention the possible influence of former President Donald Trump. The Democrat says she has no interest in the GOP primary, and instead she's preparing to roll out her own policy plans in more detail in the new year. Reporting for Atlanta Black Star, I'm Cavante Smalls.